The Baltimore Ravens finally and brutally ended the Diontae Johnson saga. We talk about that, them opening the door for a potential Odell Beckham Jr. reunion, and so much more coming up on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available for you, all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe there as well. We're a 5-day week plus more daily Ravens show, and we bring you news, analysis, updates, and so much more. Today's instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Hillsdale. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. We're diving in here to a Diontae Johnson instant reaction episode. Not the first time we've obviously had this one, as the Ravens finally, brutally, they end this saga, officially waiving Diontae on Friday afternoon. I expected to do this episode at some point. We could all kind of tell, right? Diontae Johnson, it clearly wasn't working. A lot of drama behind the situation. I personally am very glad that this is over. So at the end of the day, Baltimore needed to do this. I just feel like they were trying every possible way to see if there was maybe some way, shape, or form you could work it out. But here's the honest thing about the situation, in my opinion. Once Baltimore and Diontae Johnson had this whole situation, there was honestly no going back for me, right? I feel like once you quit on your team, that just opens up a whole different can of worms, as I've said here on this show before. So we're going to be talking about just kind of remembering the Diontae Johnson situation, more so, honestly, just getting into what the room looks like without him and where the Ravens are at this point. And then we're going to be diving into the Odell Beckham Jr. situation. And then we're going to be talking about Cam Newton ripping Stephen A. Smith in defense of Lamar Jackson. Wasn't sure I'd be able to have a chance to talk about this today. I was honestly going to do it tomorrow on our pregame episode, but we get a chance to do it because the Ravens ended up waiving Diontae Johnson. So we'll dive into all of that and more on today's show. Appreciate everybody who is live with us in the chat. Laura, appreciate you as always. Hit that like and subscribe button as well. David, appreciate you as always. Cube, appreciate you checking in. Cam, see in here as well. This is going to be an interesting one because the Ravens now have a situation at wide receiver. Really, they have for a while, right? But in all honesty, the Ravens now with Odell Beckham Jr., the potential of that, which we'll get to, that's an option for a solution. But right now, that's not a reality. What we're looking at right now for the Ravens is Baltimore having a player in Zay Flowers, another player in Tylan Wallace, and another player in Tez Walker. Those right now were the three sure things at wide receiver, because Rashad Bateman, we're not really sure what the foot injury is going to look like for him. Obviously, Nelson Aguilar was ruled out with a concussion. And then you have Anthony Miller, who actually was called up from the practice squad alongside Desmond King, who was going to be their punt returner. But Diontae Johnson certainly put the Ravens in a bind here. First of all, just what a fall for Diontae Johnson. I mean, honestly, look, he had the issues in Pittsburgh. He had the issue in Carolina. Baltimore took a pretty big risk here, if we're being honest. I mean, I don't think they expected a player of Diontae's caliber to be available when he was. And now you're in a situation where, yes, you give up little draft capital to go and get Diontae Johnson, right? That, to me, is the trade itself, talent-wise, taking everything else out of it, was a great trade. But here's the situation. There's a lot more that goes into it than just on-field talent. Diontae, there was a report, I think it was from Josina Anderson, right as the trade happened, that was, oh, well, Diontae hopefully will take this opportunity, and there's optimism for both sides to be able to work things out here. And that off the bat was just like, so you're taking on a player that you don't know if it's going to work out or not. That was a little sketchy in the first place. then we kind of talk about a situation where, look, Baltimore has so much going on with their wide receivers already in a good way, right? Zay Flowers was balling out. Rashad Bateman was really going out here. And that, to me, really signaled a lot about, okay, well, you bring in Diontae Johnson. Yes, you would like to feel a little better about the depth position, the depth situation, because, yeah, you don't want to necessarily fully rely on a Nelson Aguilar or fully rely on a Tylan Wallace. It would have been nice to have another guy in there. So you bring in Diontae Johnson instead of another guy, right? That was the thing. That was Baltimore's wide receiver move. And so we can look back on the Diontae Johnson era, and I saw, Cam, I see it up here. I think you commented it about Eric DaCosta. Is this one of EDC's biggest whiffs? I would probably say so. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the draft capital given up really isn't going to be that much. I mean, what, they moved back 20 spots in the 5th round, 10 spots in the 5th round, whatever that number was. So draft capital wise and asset wise, there was not a lot of investment in Diontae Johnson. And I think part of that is because Carolina just wanted to move off of him to get him out of their locker room. But in terms of the drama that has preceded this, or I guess come after that trade, and really everything that came with it, Diontae Johnson was a member of the Ravens for less than 2 months. And this is the most drama for one player I can remember, like on-field drama I can remember in Baltimore. You can go back however far you want to. It's been a long time since we've had that type of on-field drama here in Baltimore with a specific player. So I'm not sure that the Ravens will be very happy with what Diontae Johnson does next. I don't know. I mean, look, they clearly feel confident enough letting him go. I just feel like it was a situation that was going to drag out. They could have suspended him for the season, but I think this is what John Harbaugh was talking about during his press conference when he's like, look, there are a bunch of different, front office situations and things going on with Diontae that we're figuring out. I think John Harbaugh is probably very relieved to be rid of the situation. I'm sure everybody in the organization is disappointed, and myself included, 100% myself included. And Cam, this is actually a good point here. Most drama since Earl Thomas. Yeah, that's probably the one that I would go with on-field wise. Although on the field, he was kind of, I guess he did punch Clark on the practice field. So certainly that happened. But yeah, I don't really know what Diontae Johnson does next. I mean, let's break this down. I've talked about this a lot on Locked On Ravens. If you're an everydayer, shout out to you, first of all, for listening each and every day. But this is how I've kind of described it. If you're a young team, let's just fast forward to the offseason first. If you're a young team, you have a young wide receiver who wants to be mentored, like let's say the Giants with Malik Neighbors, right? Someone like that. And they're also probably going to bring in another quarterback, young quarterback. Would you want a player like Diontae Johnson in your locker room, mentoring your young players, showing off that attitude, right? Not being a team player. It's one thing to be unhappy with a role, right? I get it. I personally think the Ravens should use Diontae Johnson a little more. I don't think the Ravens are, free of all criticism in this situation. But when you quit on your team, that just sets a bad precedent. And I know that, people like Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and John Harbaugh and everybody, they were all talking about how it's not a distraction. It might not have been a distraction in terms of them like actively thinking about it 24/7, but it was certainly a distraction in multiple other different ways. So now for Diontae, his value is at an all-time low. I would not be shocked if he does latch on with some level of a contender. He is subject to waivers now. All vets past trade deadline, they do go through waivers. So we'll talk about Odell Beckham Jr. later in the second part of the show. He was subject to waivers. No one claimed him. So now he's free to sign with anybody else. Calais Campbell potentially is going to be a player that gets on and goes on from Miami if they're out of playoff contention. We'll see. He's going to have to go through waivers. So Diontae could get picked up by a non-contender, and maybe he's not happy about that either. And then you have all that. But in terms of what happens this season, like for the rest of the season into the postseason, I feel like, and this is me. So let's actually play a game. If you're here with us live on Locked On Ravens, put in the live chat which team you think will either claim or sign Diontae Johnson next, or if there's just no team, if Diontae doesn't even get signed, if you think it's over for him. So in the live chat, put that. If you are in the comments after the fact, be sure to put it down below in the comments. And if you're with us in audio form, be sure to message me on social media. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. For me, I'm going to go with the Steelers. And I see Corey, you put this in here. He's a Steeler inside. He hates the Ravens. What he did as an opponent. I'm just saying, I think he's going to the Steelers. That's going to be my opinion on this situation. I could look. Buffalo, I think they could use another wide receiver, but I think they're fine without him. Kansas City, yeah, sure. Maybe they could use another wide receiver. They're fine without him. Houston is an interesting spot for me because they did lose Stephon Diggs for the season. But I think the Steelers, without George Pickens, that offense is absolutely toast. The wide receivers, we talked about it today with Sam Njoku. If you haven't checked out that episode, be sure to check it out. We talked about Patrick Queen and his comments, Tom Brady gushing over Lamar. We went through the Steelers wide receiver room without George Pickens in it. It's guys like Mike Williams, Ben Skoranek, Calvin Austin. I like Calvin Austin personally, but Calvin Austin's the top player on that team. I think if the Steelers bring in Diontae Johnson, there's familiarity there. Now, the thing with Pittsburgh is I don't think they liked them in the locker room. Like, there were obviously effort issues, but Diontae spoke very highly of the Steelers during his time with the Ravens. And if he goes back to Pittsburgh, talent-wise, that does boost their offense. I think with Pickens and Diontae together again, that would boost their offense. But again, is it a fit in the locker room? How ugly was that exit from Pittsburgh? Are there any things that we don't know about that happened there? So I think to me, this could be it in Stackhouse. I see you, Chiefs. So we got some votes for the Chiefs. We got some votes for the Steelers. I see people saying no one. I see Talking Sports saying no one claims him. He signs with the Patriots. That's another team I'm talking about too. Like for Drake May or a younger wide receiver, would you want Diontae in there? There's a possibility, Talking Sports. Definitely not saying it's out of the realm for sure. But it's going to depend on which team values the talent over the potential distraction. The Ravens took a risk on it. It didn't work. And now the Ravens are in a situation where maybe they now have to go and bring back a former member of their team from last season. So let's all, again, take one last look. Diontae Johnson, Ravens legend, of course, didn't play in a lot of games. The Ravens had 5 targets, 1 reception for 6 yards, probably had more temper tantrums than he did catches on the field. So what a weird saga that thankfully comes to an end and we kind of don't have to talk about it anymore. Felt like we were talking about it every single day. But my personal, this might be a hot take. I'll do one hot take before transitioning over to the second part of the show. My hot take is the Devondre Campbell situation in San Francisco expedited this process for the Ravens. I think that seeing how the 49ers reacted to that situation, I feel like that really jump-started the Ravens on this. I think there was a possibility that they might have either tried to get him back in the locker room and see how it would work and get him back on the field, or just keep him for the season to not have him sign with a contender potentially or get claimed by a contender potentially. I think the Devondre Campbell situation jump-started this process for the Ravens, and now he is no longer a member of the team. But coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to be diving into a potential Odell Beckham Jr. reunion, Diontae Johnson out. It is certainly possible Odell Beckham Jr. comes back into the team he played for last season. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot to dive into on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Earn your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. I love going on PrizePicks, seeing everything they have to offer over there. And you can make your holidays bigger and brighter with PrizePicks, the best place to get real money action or watching your favorite sports. You can now earn up to 1,000 times money on PrizePicks, and PrizePicks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Join now because this holiday season, PrizePicks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. So if you think maybe James Cook on Buffalo get more than 60 yards next week, or maybe Joe Burrow passing for more than 1.5 touchdowns, cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. So for this week, Ravens and Steelers, I'm going to go with Derrick Henry, more on the rushing yards around. I feel good about that one this week, despite Pittsburgh's run defense being good. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDON to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDON to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And the show is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It's that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, It's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern time, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. We're back, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, our second segment of this instant reaction edition, the Ravens and the Diontae Johnson saga. It is over. No more Diontae Johnson. He is waived, and we now no longer have to hear his name again. We will definitely hear it again, but not in Baltimore. It's done. As we mentioned in the first part of the show, 5 targets, 1 reception, 6 yards. Thank you to tuning into the show today. If you're tuning in as an everydayer, thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the show, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you for tuning in to the show. Again, we're video, audio, podcast. So on YouTube and video form, we just hit 10,000 subscribers. And I got my little Wilt Chamberlain sticky note I keep holding up. Dixie Cup outfit is on the way to wear for a full week, commemorating the milestones. So be sure to like and subscribe in video form and audio form as well. We're a 5-day-a-week show in audio and video, so you're not missing out on any content. Started up audio in 2019, video in 2021, and I've done 1,405 consecutive weekday episodes dating back to 2019. So if you want daily Ravens coverage, be sure to keep it locked in here on Locked On Ravens. Now, let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr. Very interesting, the whole conversation now, because Odell Beckham got waived by the Dolphins. He's going to have an opportunity to sign with a contending team for the postseason. I think he has a short list of teams. I'm not sure if that list has been released. I haven't seen anything about it, but there's a short list of teams that are actually involved in the Odell Beckham Jr. sweepstakes, if you want to call it that. Now, Odell Beckham, as we talked about in the first part of the show, did clear waivers. So any team can sign him. He's not subject to that anymore. A team isn't going to, I think he signed for a $3.5 million contract with the Dolphins. So, look, it's not like Odell was having a great year in Miami. He was injured to start the season and had to miss the first couple of games, started the year on IR. In the season for the Jets, 9 games, he had 18 targets, 9 receptions, 55 yards, no touchdowns on the year. I think for the Odell situation, we can look back to last season. Odell Beckham Jr., in terms of on-field production, like he signed a 1-year, $15 million contract worth up to $18 million. His production last year in Baltimore, which, by the way, we'll just pull that up, was 35 receptions, 565 yards, 3 touchdowns. That was not worth $18 million. But his veteran leadership, his moments in terms of big clutch catches, he made multiple tough contested catches in big moments. Those were all really, really big. And you're not talking about Odell on a $15 million contract. Stackhouse, I see you. Odell fleeced us once. I don't think we need him again. My argument against that, and I don't blame you if you feel this way, right? I feel like some people want to just believe in Tylan Wallace and maybe give Tez Walker a bigger shot. I have seen that, and if you are in that group, I don't blame you for feeling that way. I truly don't. But in my opinion, I think having a guy in Odell who, it's going to be different because I think with his contract, you kind of had to play him a certain amount, right? You're not going to just give an $18 million guy 9 snaps or no snaps, I guess, unless you're Marcus Williams, then we can have a different conversation there. But I feel like Odell can be rotated in. And this is a different year as well because Rashad Bateman's a much better player than he was last season. Zay Flowers has taken another leap since his rookie year. I don't think you have to rely on Odell as much. But it just comes down to how comfortable you feel with depth. This goes back to the trade deadline conversation, which is why it was so important for them to get a depth wide receiver. And unfortunately, they struck out on the whole thing. It comes down to how confident you feel in Nelson Aguilar, how confident you feel in Tylan Wallace, how confident you feel in Tez Walker. Do you feel confident enough in those players? Nelson Aguilar has taken a step back this season, right? He's taken a step back. I think last year it was one of his best seasons, and he was someone that the Ravens could rely on as that number 3 receiver. It hasn't been as big of an impact for Nelson this season, right? So if you feel like Tylan should get more opportunities, or maybe Tez gets more opportunities, that's a realistic route that they go. But I feel like Odell was really big in terms of locker room presence. And again, does locker room presence help you on the field? Well, sometimes. I mean, sometimes it does. Distractions or non-distractions. It actually helps it out. Now, for me personally, the reason I'm on the Odell Beckham train is because he does have playoff experience, right? I think when you talk about a guy like Tez Walker, I think he has a lot of potential, but he has one catch on the season, and that happened last week. I don't necessarily trust Tez right now. Look, down the line, sure, right? Development happens, and he gets more years under his belt. I think Tez is a really exciting player, but I'd rather have Odell over him right now. I think Tylen deserves more opportunities, and I think that if you run almost like a trio wide receiver 3 thing with Odell, Tylen Wallace, Nelson Aguilar, you involve Isaiah Likely a little bit more as well. So for me, I think that Tez can make some level of an impact, but I'm just not sure how big that's going to be. And honestly, I don't think the Ravens, once Rashad is healthy and, everything that goes on with that, Nelson comes back. And if that situation is good and everybody's healthy in the wide receiver room, I don't think Tez gets a lot of run anyway. But here's the situation. If Rashad Bateman has to miss time, and I told you, look, this isn't, knock on wood, this does not happen. But Rashad Bateman, let's say he has to miss the rest of the year. Now, we got a report from Albert Breer that said the Ravens thought that his injury was maybe serious, but testing revealed that it wasn't. We'll see how he ends up going and if he ends up playing at all against the Steelers. But if he has to miss more time, or let's say Zay Flowers goes down, again, knock on wood, that does not happen. We look at a wide receiver room of Zay Flowers, Nelson Aguilar, Tylen Wallace, and Tez Walker. And I guess Anthony Miller, if we're going off of practice squad elevations. I would feel more comfortable with Odell in that room, even if they don't use him all that much. I'd feel more confident with Odell in that room just for the possibility, because that was the whole thing with Diontae, wasn't it? It was if one of those big two goes down with Diontae stepping in, you feel better about that than Nelson Aguilar doing. To me, I'm actually curious about this in the chat or in the comments, or you can message me about your opinion as well. Who do you trust more, Odell Beckham or Nelson Aguilar? Let's start there, because clearly the Ravens chose Nelson over Odell last season. I think they only had one spot. They chose Nelson over Odell. Right now, who would you trust in a situation if the Ravens had to put a third wide receiver on the field? Let's take Tylen out of this as well, right? I probably would trust Tylen over Odell right now, but let's just take that out. Let's just narrow it down to Nelson and OBJ. Would you trust Nelson or Odell more? So I'll wait for a couple seconds to see. I already see we got some Odell. We got a couple of Nelsons as well. It's pretty close. I think the fan base is kind of split here between Odell and Nelson. It's just a matter of everything that Nelson, because Nelson has been with the team now for 2 years. Odell obviously would have to come in. There's familiarity there. It's very close to me. I would probably lean Odell by literally 51-49. Not taking away from what Nelson did. I just haven't been as impressed with Nelson this season. He's made some big catches. For sure. But I feel like, to me, Odell's a player that could come in. Now, if you told me, look, we have a lot of Nellies in the chat. A lot of Nellies. And Joe, I see we got the TikTok girl who knew Nelson Aguilar. She says Nelson too. So maybe I do have to change to Nelson because she said so. But no, yeah, I see we got a bunch of Odells. We got Nelsons. We got Odells. I just feel like, to me, why not both? You can have both. There's an opportunity to bring in Odell. And your wide receiver room looks like Zay, Rashad, OBJ, Nelson, Tylen, Tez. I feel a lot better about that than Tez, Odell. Well, I guess Odell's not in this situation. It's Zay, Rashad, Tylen, Nelson, Tez. Because I feel like Baltimore could get away with keeping 5 wide receivers, right? We could get away with it. But I feel like 6. And maybe this is actually a situation where the Ravens sign Odell to the practice squad and use elevations on him. There's also a situation where the Ravens, because here's my big brain putting the tinfoil hat on theory. John Harbaugh made it very clear that Desmond King is going to be the punt returner for the Ravens moving forward. Deserved. Was awesome in the Giants game. Awesome. They're going to run out of elevations if they end up elevating him to, well, now it's now 2 because he is elevated for the game. They've used 2 elevations. You can only get 3. They have 4 opportunities here. So Desmond King's elevations will run out before the last game of the season against the Browns. They'll have to make a decision on him by then. What my big brain theory would be here is if Odell signs, it's going to be to the practice squad. They're going to give Desmond King an active roster spot because elevations, from my understanding, I think I read this right, they are unlimited during the playoffs. So with Desmond, his elevations will run out. With Odell, you can put him on the practice squad and he will have unlimited elevations come playoff time if you want to go that route. So I think what the Ravens would do is they would elevate Desmond King to the actual active roster. And then they would move Odell to the practice squad, and that would be the situation. So I think it's certainly possible. You sign him to either a vet minimum deal or a practice squad contract. I think it's a very low-risk signing that maybe has low reward. Maybe it has high reward, but it's possible that Baltimore does go that route. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we're going to be talking about Lamar Jackson a little bit, previewing the Steelers a bit, and Cam Newton ripped into Stephen A. in defense of Lamar. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to dive into on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so no waste scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. Plus, they have a course on the Great American Story and so much more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on. Register, hillsdale.edu/locked-on. We are back, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, still talking with you here on this Friday afternoon, heading into Friday evening. Hopefully everybody's having a good start to their weekend. I know we're right up the holiday season, so maybe you got some time off coming up, or maybe you still got to go into work. Regardless, we'll be here for you on Locked On Ravens 5 days per week plus more. We'll be back here tomorrow, 6 a.m. Eastern time for a pre-game edition of the show, game day edition. And then, of course, after the Ravens take on the Steelers, we'll be live right here on Locked On Ravens about 15, maybe 30 minutes max after kickoff, or after the game ends, as we will be diving into everything that happened in that game. Now, Cam Newton absolutely went in on Stephen A. Smith as they were talking about Lamar Jackson and the MVP conversation. And look, it's been something we've been talking about forever here on Locked On Ravens. And Cam Newton took it upon himself to let Stephen A. know how he felt about the situation. Literally, it was one of the most, it was awesome. It was honestly awesome. So we got Cam saying, respectfully, I see how you talk about Lamar. Right now, I'm taking Lamar Jackson over any quarterback in the NFL. You're not holding Josh Allen to the same standards. And this, to me, truths. These are truths. These are truths that Stephen A. Smith is having to face from Cam Newton. Cam Newton is letting them know, because we have talked about this on the show. We have heard about it in other places. Lamar Jackson is held to a different standard than everybody else. It's true. It's true. Now, I'm not coming on here and saying Lamar doesn't get awesome amounts of praise. He does. He gets a lot of praise. But when we talk about the Josh Allen conversations, the Joe Burrow conversations, right? That is what it is. Lamar gets held to a different standard than those guys. And to me, it's okay if Lamar doesn't play as well as Josh Allen one week, or has a bad game, or doesn't deserve an MVP, or this, that, and the other. But you got to hold the same context for both players, or all players. And Stephen A. has consistently gotten on his show, gotten on his platforms, and disrespected Lamar Jackson, slandered Lamar Jackson, tried to put out false news about Lamar Jackson. And Cam Newton is saying, hey, I'd take Lamar over anybody in the league right now. And Stephen A. goes, what, including Josh Allen? And Cam's like, yes. He then compared the side-by-sides. He compared the side-by-sides. And that's what we've been doing here on Locked On Ravens. Lamar Jackson in every single statistical category but rushing touchdowns. Josh Allen does not have it over Lamar. Cam Newton said Lamar is beating Josh Allen in every single statistic outside of the overall team record in rushing touchdowns. I don't like the propaganda that's going on. Because, again, you can prop up Josh Allen. I don't have a problem with that. But you also have to prop up Lamar Jackson when he deserves it. Because we talk about, look, this is what have you done for me now lately league. And we all acknowledge that. We've all talked about that here on this show. Well, Unfortunately, the Buffalo game did not happen recently. It happened back in September, but that game has been wiped from the face of the earth. It's been wiped from the face of the earth, where Lamar Jackson outperformed Josh Allen. Josh Allen had a clunker. The Ravens decimated the Bills. So at the end of the day, there are multiple different situations where Josh Allen can win MVP, right? If he wins MVP, not shocked, he'll deserve it. But to say the race is over or to say Josh is worlds better, here's how I view this situation. Lamar Jackson has Tom Brady in his corner. He has Peyton Manning in his corner. He has Aaron Rodgers in his corner. He has Cam Newton. He has Bill Belichick. Peers, Hall of Fame peers. And I'm not saying that those guys hate on Josh Allen and only like Lamar. I'm not saying that. But the conversation from those guys is Lamar's awesome, Josh Allen is awesome. The MVP race is cool. Both these guys are having amazing seasons, right? The conversation from others that maybe don't have the accolades at the pro level or haven't played football at all, or Josh Allen's the MVP. MVP is not a great player award. It's most valuable player, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to take the advice and take the side of the Hall of Famers as opposed to the other guys. That's just me. You can do whatever you want, right? You can take the side of the other guys. You can do whatever. But it speaks volumes to me, at least, that Lamar and Tom Brady in particular, which we talked about on this morning's episode of the show, that, in my opinion, is one of the big reasons why. Look, Lamar is an amazing player. Josh Allen is an amazing player. But when you look at the conversations that are being had about both, and even you can throw Joe Burrow in the conversation as well, there's a lot of, oh, well, it's all Lamar's fault when he loses, but Josh Allen doesn't have weapons. And when Josh Allen wins, it's, wow, look at this. Josh Allen, this was supposed to be a down year. And, the Bills, they traded away the top wide receivers and this, that, and the other. Did we forget that Lamar had to win an MVP with Willie Snead and Marquise? No shade to Marquise Brown and Willie Snead, obviously. But look, that's a lot different. And we're talking about, oh, well, Lamar, he always has had good weapons. That's not true. It's not true. So there are different conversations surrounding different players. That's just the reality, and I'm glad Cam was able to call it out to one of the people who does it on a pretty consistent basis. And look, I know Stephen A is a Steelers fan. That's pretty well documented. But when you're on a national platform like that, you have to take your fandom out of it. And it feels like sometimes Stephen A doesn't, or just there's this personal vendetta. I don't know what it is. But shout out to Cam for that. I also am confident in the Ravens in the Steelers game, by the way. I just feel like without George Pickens, that was kind of the final nail in the coffin for me here. I think it's going to still be a close game. Ravens-Steelers games always are. I'm not declaring the Ravens are going to win by 30 points here. We know the history. So I'm going to say Baltimore wins. I said it on this morning's show, 24-17. I think Lamar Jackson gets revenge, I guess, if you want to call it that, on the Steelers. And we're going to see what ends up happening in that contest. But Diontae Johnson, that situation, that saga is done. Odell Beckham potentially coming in. We will see if that ends up happening. And we got a big game coming up tomorrow with the Pittsburgh Steelers in Baltimore. That's all I have for you here today on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. Again, we'll be right back here tomorrow, 6 a.m. Eastern time, doing a game day episode of Locked On Ravens. And then right after the game ends, we'll be going on live talking about what happened in the game. Win, lose, hopefully not tie. So on the way out, hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Follow along and subscribe in video form as well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.